You know that feeling when someone you trust completely drives a knife into your back? 2 years ago, I walked into my bedroom and found my wife Roseanne tangled up with Nicholas Whitlock, my business partner of 8 years, the guy I'd built everything with from nothing. The rage that hit me wasn't just anger. It was this white-hot mix of humiliation and devastation that made my hands shake and my vision tunnel. Most people like to think they'd handle betrayal with dignity, maybe take the high road. I grabbed my hunting rifle instead. I watched Nicholas literally piss himself when I walked in with that gun across my arms. I threw them both out that afternoon. Then I spent the next 2 years systematically destroying their lives, dissolved our partnership, took Roseanne for everything in the divorce, made sure they both lost their reputations, their money, their futures. My name is Steve Harrison and I'm 36 years old. If you've ever been stabbed in the back by someone you trusted, you'll understand exactly why I did what I did. But let me start from the beginning. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from. And make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. That Tuesday afternoon, our cement delivery got postponed until Thursday. I called my crew at noon and told them to head home early. No point standing around a job site with nothing to pour. I'd been running Harrison and Whitlock Construction for 8 years, built it from absolutely nothing with Nicholas, my college buddy who I'd trusted like a brother. We were finally landing the big commercial contracts, making real money, building something that mattered. I pulled into my driveway around 2 p.m. and saw Nicholas's black Silverado parked on the street. My gut twisted hard. We'd just finished a job site meeting 2 hours ago. Why the hell was he at my house? I pushed through the front door and stopped cold. The house was quiet except for sounds coming from upstairs. Rhythmic, unmistakable. My blood turned to ice first, then to something much hotter. I walked to my gun safe in the hallway closet, pulled out my hunting rifle, unloaded but they wouldn't know that, and started up the stairs. Each step was deliberate, controlled. I wasn't panicking. I was calculating exactly what I was about to do. I kicked open my bedroom door. Roseanne screamed. Nicholas scrambled backward off my bed like a cockroach caught in sudden light, his face going white as fresh paint. My wife, naked, tangled in sheets that I'd bought, in a bed that I'd paid for, in a house that had my name on the deed, stared at me with her mouth hanging open. "Steve," she started. "Shut up." I didn't yell. Didn't need to. I walked in slowly, rifle resting across my arms. "Don't say a goddamn word, Roseanne." Nicholas was trying to grab his boxers, his hands shaking so badly he could barely function. "Steve, man, listen." I said shut up. I looked at him, really looked at him, and something dark and cold settled over me like a familiar coat. "How long, Nicholas? How long have you been screwing my wife while shaking my hand every morning?" "Steve, please." Roseanne was crying now, wrapping the sheet around herself like it could protect her from what was coming. "Answer the question." I chambered around, just the sound, that metallic click that filled every corner of the room. Nicholas's bladder gave out. I watched a dark stain spread down his leg as he literally pissed himself, stumbling backward against my dresser. "Oh, Jesus, Steve, don't." He was sobbing, actually sobbing like a child. 6 months, okay? 6 months. Please, man, please don't." 6 months. I let that sink in, let the number settle into my bones. 6 months of lies. 6 months of partnership meetings where he looked me in the eye. 6 months of Roseanne kissing me goodbye every morning before I left for work. "You've been inside my house eating my food, stealing my money through our company, and screwing my wife for 6 months. It wasn't like that." Roseanne tried. "It was exactly like that." I turned the rifle toward her, not aiming, just gesturing. "You both played me for a fool, made your plans behind my back, probably laughed about it, right? Stupid Steve working 70-hour weeks while his wife spreads her legs for his business partner." "No, Steve, no." She was hysterical now, mascara running down her face in black rivers. "Get dressed. Both of you. You've got 5 minutes to get the hell out of my house." Nicholas was scrambling for his clothes, still crying, urine soaking through his pants. Pathetic. This was the man I'd trusted with 50% of my business, who I'd co-signed loans with, who I'd considered family. "Steve, We need to talk about this. Roseanne was trying to sound reasonable now, trying to find some kind of footing. 4 minutes. And Roseanne, don't take anything except the clothes you're wearing. That jewelry I bought you, those designer bags, that car in the garage, all mine. You leave with nothing. You can't. 3 minutes, test me. I watched them dress like I was watching strangers, watched Nicholas shuffle toward the door like a whipped dog, still smelling of piss and fear. Roseanne tried one more time at the bedroom door, mascara running, hands shaking. Steve, please, we can work through. There is no we. There's never going to be a we again. You destroyed that when you brought him into our bed. I stepped closer and she flinched. Good. Here's what's going to happen. I'm filing for divorce. I'm dissolving our partnership. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people you both are. You're being cruel. I'm being merciful, because right now, with what I'm feeling, merciful is letting you walk out alive. Now get out of my house. They left. I watched from the window as Nicholas's truck peeled away from the curb, Roseanne in the passenger seat, both of them looking back at my house like scared animals fleeing a predator. I didn't shake, didn't break down. I pulled out my phone and made 3 calls. First, Thomas McGraw, the most vicious divorce attorney in the state. Second, Fred Anderson, my accountant who I trusted with every detail of our business finances. Third, my brother Daniel, who worked in private investigation and owed me more favors than I could count. By nightfall, I had 3 appointments scheduled for tomorrow morning. The wheels were already turning. The next morning, I sat across from Thomas McGraw in his downtown office. Shark in a tailored suit, that's what people called him, and I could see why. Everything about him was sharp. Sharp suit, sharp eyes, sharp mind. I told him everything. The discovery, the rifle, Nicholas pissing himself, the 6 months of lies. Thomas listened without interrupting, just taking notes on his legal pad in quick, efficient strokes. 6 months of documented affair, he said when I finished. Did you get any evidence? My brother's pulling phone records, emails, everything. Nicholas was stupid enough to use his company email for some of it. And I've got doorbell camera footage time-stamped from dozens of days when his truck was at my house during work hours. Thomas smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. This is going to be easier than I thought. California's a no-fault state, but adultery still matters for asset division, especially when it involves marital resources. Your house, solely in your name? Bought it before we married, kept it in my name. Smart. The business? 50-50 partnership with Nicholas, but I'm the one with the contractor's license. He's just investor muscle and project management. We can work with that. Thomas leaned forward, his pen tapping against the legal pad. Here's the play. We file for divorce immediately, citing irreconcilable differences with a claim for full asset protection based on adultery. We freeze all joint accounts. We get a restraining order if she tries to come back to the house. Simultaneously, you initiate a business partnership dissolution, claiming breach of fiduciary duty. If Nicholas used any company resources, time, money, company property, to facilitate this affair, we can argue he violated his partnership obligations. He absolutely did. Company truck, company phone, probably company credit cards for hotel rooms. Even better. Thomas was writing faster now, his excitement barely contained. We'll audit everything. Every receipt, every expense report, every time card. If he was on company time while in your bed, that's theft of services. We can sue him personally for damages to the business. I thought about that. Thought about Nicholas sitting in partnership meetings, reviewing budgets, signing checks, all while planning his next afternoon with my wife. The rage was cold now, controlled, useful. How do we prove it? Your accountant. When's he getting here? Should be any minute. Fred Anderson arrived exactly 1 hour later. He brought spreadsheets, actual printed spreadsheets in a manila folder, the kind of thoroughness that made him worth every dollar I paid him. I've been through the last 6 months of company finances, Fred said, spreading papers across Thomas's conference table. Nicholas has been sloppy. Hotel charges on the company card, 11 separate occasions. Expensive dinners for 2. A jewelry purchase from Cartier for $8,000 categorized as client gifts. My stomach dropped. Roseanne's wearing a Cartier bracelet. I thought I bought it for her birthday. You did, in a way, Fred said, his voice gentle but firm. With company money he embezzled. That's fraud, Steve. Clear cut. We can pursue criminal charges if you want. I thought about that. Criminal charges meant police, meant publicity, meant Nicholas might go to jail. And yeah, part of me wanted to see him in an orange jumpsuit, wanted to watch him processed and fingerprinted and locked up like the criminal he was. But another part, the colder, more calculating part, wanted something different. Let's keep that in our back pocket, I said slowly. I want to destroy him, but I want him free to suffer through it. Thomas and Fred exchanged a look. Understanding passed between them. That's the smart play, Thomas said. We use the criminal threat as leverage. He'll give up anything, the business, the partnership buyout, everything to avoid prosecution. And without a criminal record, he'll have to face the social consequences, the professional consequences, all of it. He won't get the escape of prison. He'll have to live in the wreckage. How much did he steal total? I asked Fred. Fred flipped through his spreadsheets. Confirmed? $42,318. That's just what I can prove with receipts. Could be more if we dig deeper. $42,000. That's what my partnership was worth to him. That's what he valued our 8-year friendship at. The price of hotel rooms and dinners and a bracelet for my wife. Do you know what that kind of betrayal does to you? It doesn't just hurt. It clarifies. It shows you exactly who people are when they think you're not watching. We use everything, I said. The embezzlement, the fraud, the breach of fiduciary duty. I want him to walk away with nothing. Thomas started making notes. We'll file the partnership dissolution papers tomorrow. I'll need you to sign some documents, provide bank statements, authorize the full audit. Whatever you need. And Steve? Thomas looked up from his legal pad. This is going to get ugly. Roseanne's going to fight. Nicholas is going to panic. They're going to try everything. Threats, bargaining, playing the victim. You need to be ready for that. I'm ready. I wasn't lying. I'd been ready since the moment I kicked open that bedroom door. 8 days after I caught them, Thomas called me. She's hired Valerie Romero. I was standing in my kitchen, staring at the coffee maker, running on maybe 4 hours of sleep. Should I know that name? She's good, aggressive. She's going to fight for spousal support, claim Roseanne sacrificed her career for your marriage, argue for half of everything. Roseanne worked part-time at a boutique. The words came out flat. She didn't sacrifice anything. Doesn't matter, she'll try. But we've got the evidence. I'm sending you our discovery requests. We need bank statements, credit card records, phone records, everything for the last 2 years. I gave him everything. Every statement, every receipt, every document he asked for. Turned out keeping good records was useful for more than just tax season. Daniel came through 3 days later. My brother showed up at my house with a USB drive and a look on his face that told me I wasn't going to like what he'd found. Phone records, he said, handing me the drive. Hundreds of calls between Roseanne and Nicola. Started about 8 months ago. Casual at first, then ramping up 6 months back. Text messages. Recovered from the cloud backup on Nicholas's phone. His password was pathetic. Daniel pulled out his laptop, opened a file. Steve, you might want to sit down for this. I read them standing up. Steve's working late again, come over at 8. He bought me flowers today, so clueless. See you tomorrow. When are we going to tell him? I'm tired of sneaking around. That last one hit different. They'd been planning to tell me, on their timeline, like I was some problem to be managed, rather than a husband who'd built everything with them. I closed the laptop before I could throw it across the room. Thanks, Daniel. You okay? No, but I will be. Nicholas tried to fight the partnership dissolution, hired himself a lawyer named Bill Wright, who sent Thomas a letter arguing that I was acting emotionally, that the business was separate from personal matters, that I couldn't just destroy our company because of a domestic dispute. Thomas set up mediation for 2 weeks later. The conference room at the mediator's office was sterile. White walls, glass table, uncomfortable chairs designed to make you want the meeting to end quickly. Nicholas sat across from me with Bill beside him, both of them in cheap suits that looked rented. Nicholas wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked like hell. Unshaven, exhausted, 10 years older than when I'd caught him. Good. Thomas didn't waste time. He slid a folder across the table to Bill. Mr. Whitlock, Thomas said, his voice carrying that edge lawyers get when they know they've won. These are receipts for 11 hotel rooms charged to Harrison and Whitlock Construction. Can you explain the business purpose for these expenses? Bill flipped through them, his face going red. My client may have made errors in expense categorization. These aren't errors. This is embezzlement. Your client used company funds to facilitate an extramarital affair with his business partner's wife. He stole time, money, and resources from a company he had a fiduciary duty to protect. Fred jumped in without missing a beat. We've also identified over $40,000 in questionable expenses over the past 6 months. Restaurants, gifts, a weekend trip to Napa that was supposedly a client development visit, but where no clients were present, just Mr. Whitlock and Mrs. Harrison. I watched Nicholas squirm in his chair like a trapped animal. Here's the deal, I said, speaking directly to him for the first time since that day in my bedroom. You sell me your half of the company. Fair market value, minus the $40,000 you stole, minus the legal fees I'm incurring, minus punitive damages for breach of fiduciary duty. That leaves you with about $75,000 for your 50% stake in a business worth $800,000. That's insane, Bill protested. You're robbing him. I'm being generous. The alternative is I press criminal charges for embezzlement, sue him personally for damages, and force a bankruptcy liquidation where he gets nothing and walks away with a criminal record. He's got 24 hours to decide. Bill started to argue, but Nicholas grabbed his arm. I'll take it, Nicholas whispered. Nicholas, don't. I'll take it. The next afternoon, Nicholas signed the papers with hands that shook so badly he could barely hold the pen. I watched his signature, the same signature that had been on our partnership agreement 8 years ago, finalize his exit from everything we'd built together. Harrison and Whitlock Construction became Harrison Construction. I walked out of that office with my business, my reputation, and everything that mattered. Nicholas walked out with a check and the knowledge that he'd destroyed his life for nothing. 3 months after I caught them, I sat in Judge Diane Clarkson's courtroom for the first major divorce hearing. The courtroom smelled like old wood and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Roseanne sat at the plaintiff's table with Valerie Romero, wearing a conservative navy dress that was supposed to make her look sympathetic. She'd lost weight. Dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. I didn't feel sorry for her. Thomas sat beside me, his leather briefcase open, files organized with color-coded tabs. He was ready for war. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Diane Clarkson presiding. Judge Clarkson entered, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She had that no-nonsense look judges get after years of listening to people's worst moments. Be seated. This is the matter of Harrison versus Harrison, case number FL2847. Counsel, opening statements. Valerie Romero stood first. Your Honor, my client Roseanne Harrison is a woman who spent 20 years devoted to a marriage that left her emotionally isolated and neglected. She worked part-time to support her husband's ambitions, while he became increasingly absent, controlling and focused solely on his business. When she finally sought connection and companionship elsewhere, Mr. Harrison responded with extreme vindictiveness, forcing her from their shared home without her belongings, destroying her reputation, and attempting to leave her destitute through this divorce. We're asking the court to recognize Mrs. Harrison's contributions to the marriage and award appropriate spousal support and asset division. I clenched my jaw. The audacity of that narrative, like I'd driven her into Nicholas's bed. Thomas stood slowly. Your Honor, Mrs. Harrison's attorney has painted a creative fiction. The evidence tells a different story. He opened his first file. Over the past 2 years, Mr. Harrison paid for 3 vacation trips for himself and Mrs. Harrison, Hawaii, Mexico, and a wine country tour. He gave Mrs. Harrison unlimited access to their joint bank accounts. He supported her part-time work schedule without complaint or pressure to contribute more financially. Thomas pulled out another document. Meanwhile, Mrs. Harrison conducted a 6-month affair using marital resources. She brought her lover, Mr. Harrison's business partner, into the marital home repeatedly. She used money from their joint account for dinners and hotels. And when Mr. Harrison discovered the affair, She showed zero remorse. The evidence will show that Mrs. Harrison was not neglected. She was entitled, comfortable, and willing to destroy her marriage for selfish gratification. Judge Clarkson looked at Roseanne over her reading glasses. Mrs. Harrison, is it true that this affair was conducted in your marital home? Roseanne's face crumpled. Yes, Your Honor. But the marriage was already... And Mr. Whitlock was your husband's business partner? Yes, but I'm not interested in justifications, Mrs. Harrison. I'm interested in facts. Judge Clarkson turned to me. Mr. Harrison, what are you seeking in this divorce? I stood. My voice came out steady, controlled. Full separation of assets, Your Honor. The house was mine before marriage, purchased in my name alone. I'm willing to split the joint savings account 50-50, but I'm asking for compensation for marital funds that were essentially stolen through her affair. Dinners, hotels, gifts that she received which were purchased with company money my business partner embezzled. How much? $20,000. Valerie shot to her feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is punitive and excessive. Mr. Harrison is attempting to financially punish my client for stealing? Judge Clarkson's eyebrow raised. Ms. Romero, if Mrs. Harrison used marital funds to facilitate an extramarital affair, that's a legitimate claim. Objection overruled. The judge reviewed the financial documents Thomas had submitted. The courtroom was silent except for pages turning. Finally, Judge Clarkson looked up. I've reviewed the evidence. The house remains Mr. Harrison's separate property. The joint savings account, currently $60,000, will be split equally. However, Mr. Harrison's claim for $20,000 in compensation is granted. Mrs. Harrison will receive $30,000 minus the compensation claim, leaving her with $10,000. Roseanne gasped. Valerie started to object again, but the judge held up her hand. This court does not reward marital misconduct, Ms. Romero. Your client conducted an affair using marital resources in the marital home with her husband's business partner. She's fortunate Mr. Harrison isn't seeking additional damages. The ruling stands. I walked out of that courtroom with my house, my business, and my dignity. Roseanne walked out with $10,000 and the life she'd chosen. 6 weeks after the divorce ruling, I was meeting with Greg Paulson, a supplier I'd worked with for years, when he mentioned needing a recommendation for a project manager. You know anyone reliable? Greg asked, shuffling through invoices at his desk. Todd Sanders. Worked with him on the Riverside Plaza job. Solid guy, organized, finishes on time. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Greg paused, then added carefully, heard you're running solo now. Harrison Construction's doing well? Better than ever, actually. Landed 2 commercial contracts last month. Greg nodded but didn't ask about Nicholas. Didn't mention the partnership dissolution. Just moved on to discussing lumber prices like there was nothing else to say. That's when I realized everyone knew. And everyone had made their decision about who deserved their business. Construction's a tight community. Everyone knows everyone, and word travels fast. When people asked about the Harrison and Whitlock dissolution, and they did ask, constantly those first few months I kept it simple. Nicholas breached his fiduciary duty and personally betrayed me. Couldn't continue the partnership after that. That's all I said, ever. Just the facts. The details filled themselves in through gossip, through mutual friends who'd heard the story, through suppliers who'd noticed the hotel charges on our company card and wondered, through the small, interconnected world of contractors who'd all worked with both of us at some point. The story spread like wildfire, and Nicholas became toxic overnight. No one wanted to partner with a guy who'd betray his business partner like that. No one wanted to trust him with their money, their reputation, their projects. You betray one partner, you'll betray the next. That's how people saw it. I heard through the grapevine that Nicholas couldn't secure new contracts, couldn't find anyone willing to take him on as a partner or investor. His reputation was destroyed, not by anything I said, but by what he'd done. He ended up taking a foreman position at someone else's company, making 1/3 of what he'd made as my partner, working for someone else instead of building something of his own. That's what betrayal costs you in this industry. Everything. Roseanne faced her own destruction, and honestly, I didn't have to lift a finger there either. Marianne Green owned the boutique where Roseanne had worked part-time. Marianne had known us both for years, came to our house for dinners, sent us Christmas cards, considered us friends. When Marianne found out what happened, she called me directly. "Steve, I just heard, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Roseanne was—" She paused, clearly uncomfortable. "I can't have someone with no integrity representing my store. I fired her this morning." "You didn't have to do that, Marianne." "Yes, I did. What she did to you, what they both did, it's unforgivable. I won't have that kind of person working for me." Roseanne moved into a small apartment on the east side after that. I drove past it once, purely by accident, and nearly laughed. It was the kind of place she would have called depressing back when she lived in my 4-bedroom house. Peeling paint, cramped parking lot, bars on the windows. She and Nicholas tried to make it work at first. Moved in together, played house with their affair now public. Tried to build something real from the lies they'd been living. It lasted 3 months. I heard about the breakup from Daniel, who heard it from a mutual friend. Apparently they couldn't handle the financial stress, the ruined reputations, the reality that everyone they knew had chosen my side. The relationship that had seemed so worth destroying everything for, it crumbled under the weight of consequences they'd never anticipated. Nicholas moved into an even cheaper apartment alone. Roseanne stayed in hers. They'd burned down their lives for each other, and in the end, they couldn't even stand to be in the same room. You know what I felt when I heard that? Nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. No vindication. Just a cold understanding that some people destroy everything they touch, including each other. 8 months after the divorce finalized, I landed 2 major commercial contracts in the same week. A shopping plaza renovation and a new medical office building, combined value of $1.2 million. I stood in my office looking at the signed contracts spread across my desk and felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Genuine pride, not vindication. Not satisfaction from watching Nicholas and Roseanne suffer. Just honest-to-God pride in what I'd built. Harrison Construction was thriving. Without Nicholas's sloppy management, without his constant distractions and corner-cutting, we were finishing projects ahead of schedule and under budget. Word spread fast about that kind of reliability. New clients called every week. I'd hired Todd Sanders as my new project manager 3 months after the dissolution. I'd known Todd for years. He'd worked on a few of our subcontractor teams back when it was still Harrison and Whitlock. Competent, honest, professional. Everything Nicholas had never been. Todd brought discipline to our operations, actual organization, detailed schedules, proper inventory management, crew assignments that made sense instead of Nicholas's usual chaos. "You should have fired that guy years ago," Todd told me once, reviewing old project files. "Half these delays were completely avoidable. He was just lazy." Within the first year, Harrison Construction was worth more than Harrison and Whitlock had ever been. I took on more crew, bought new equipment, started bidding on projects we never could have handled before. The business was booming. Finally. But the best part? I was actually living again. I'd started dating cautiously, not really expecting anything serious. Then I met Clara Hernandez through mutual friends. She was a nurse, divorced, with 2 kids of her own. She knew my history. Everyone did by that point. But she didn't judge, didn't pry. Just let me talk when I needed to and gave me space when I didn't. We took it slow. Dinners, movies, long conversations where I actually laughed instead of just going through the motions. Clara had this way of calling me out when I started disappearing into work mode. "You're doing it again," she'd say gently. "Hiding. Come back." And I would. Because she was right. And because for the first time since Roseanne, I wanted to be present for someone. Her kids were good kids, 7 and 9, curious and energetic. They made my house feel alive again instead of like a museum of broken trust. Everything was perfect. The business. Clara. My life rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. Justice had been served. Nicholas was working for someone else, making a fraction of what he'd made as my partner. Roseanne was living in poverty, working retail if she could find anyone willing to hire her. I'd won. Completely. That's when Nicholas showed up at my office. Todd intercepted him at the front entrance. "Steve doesn't want to see you." You need to leave. But I heard Nicholas's voice through my office door, heard the desperation in it. Steve, please, I need 5 minutes, it's important. I should have let Todd throw him out, should have kept the boundary firm. But something in his voice made me curious. Not sympathetic, just curious. Let him in, Todd. Todd shot me a look that said this is a mistake, but he stepped aside. Nicholas walked into my office and I barely recognized him. Gaunt, exhausted, dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and serious problems. He'd aged 10 years in the 8 months since I'd last seen him. Steve, he said, his voice cracking. We need to talk. We've got nothing to talk about. Say what you came to say and get out. He sat down without being invited, hands shaking. I'm being audited, the IRS. They're saying I owe back taxes, unreported income, questionable deductions. He rubbed his face. They're claiming I owe $180,000. That's not my problem. It is, though. He looked up at me, and I saw genuine fear in his eyes. The audit includes the partnership years, Harrison and Whitlock. They're looking at our old tax returns, our deductions, our contracts. They're questioning things our accountant did, things that... He paused. Steve, if they find irregularities, they'll audit Harrison Construction too, your company. And if they decide we were wrong about certain deductions, you could owe hundreds of thousands in back taxes and penalties. My blood went cold. What irregularities? I don't know all the details yet, but our old accountant, Gerald Hubert, he was aggressive with deductions, really aggressive. And now the IRS is saying some of them don't hold up. I stared at him, feeling everything I'd rebuilt start to crack beneath my feet. I called Fred the second Nicholas left my office. I need you here. Now. He arrived within the hour, briefcase in hand, his face grim when he saw the IRS notices Nicholas had left behind. We spread everything across my conference table. Pages and pages of audit findings, tax code citations, penalty calculations that made my stomach turn. Fred studied each page in silence, occasionally making notes, his expression getting darker with every document he reviewed. Finally, he looked up. This is bad, Steve. How bad? Gerald Hubert was playing fast and loose with business expense categories. I flagged some of this when I first started working with you, but I assumed it was historical. Cleaned up. He tapped one of the notices. The IRS is questioning deductions from 3 years ago, equipment purchases that might have been personal, travel expenses that don't have proper documentation, client entertainment that looks suspiciously like personal dining. Can we fight it? We can try. But if the IRS decides these were fraudulent deductions, they'll reassess taxes for the past 3 years, both the old partnership and Harrison Construction. Give me numbers, Fred. He pulled out his calculator, started working through figures. The silence stretched while he calculated, and every second felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Worst case? He finally said. 300,000 to 400,000 in back taxes and penalties. Best case, if we can negotiate and prove some of these were honest mistakes? Maybe $150,000. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. There's more, Nicholas said from the doorway. I'd forgotten he was still there, waiting. What? My voice came out flat. Dead. Roseanne filed an appeal. On the divorce settlement. The divorce is final. Her lawyer found some precedent. Cases where businesses were dissolved during divorce proceedings, where the valuation was questioned later. Nicholas wouldn't meet my eyes. She's claiming the company was worth more than we disclosed, that you hid assets. And she wants a portion of Harrison Construction's growth since the divorce. I stared at him. You've got to be kidding me. I'm sorry, Steve, but with these IRS problems, it's going to look really bad. Like you undervalued the business to avoid paying her, and now the government's caught you. Fred was already on his phone, probably calling Thomas. I heard him explaining the situation in clipped professional tones. I couldn't breathe right. Everything I'd fought for, everything I'd built from the ruins of their betrayal, was crumbling. The next 3 months were hell. The IRS investigation consumed my life. Hundreds of hours reviewing documents, meeting with Fred, sitting in Thomas's office while he coordinated with tax attorneys. Fred worked overtime, reconstructing 3 years of business finances, trying to justify every single deduction Gerald had taken. Then Judge Clarkson agreed to review Roseanne's appeal. Valerie Romero subpoenaed every financial record Harrison Construction had, every contract I'd landed, every profit margin I'd earned, every bit of growth I'd achieved through my own work. All of it became evidence that I'd supposedly hidden assets during the divorce. I stopped sleeping. 3, maybe 4 hours a night, waking up with my heart racing, my mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. I snapped at my crew over minor mistakes, lost my temper when Todd questioned a decision. He pulled me aside one afternoon, his face serious. "Steve, you need to get your head straight. You're falling apart and it's affecting everyone." "I'm handling it." "You're not. You're barely functional. Whatever's happening, you need to deal with it before you destroy everything you've rebuilt." Clara said almost the same thing that night over dinner. "You're disappearing again," she said quietly. "Just like you told me you used to do during your marriage. Buried in work, unavailable, stressed to the breaking point. I'm dealing with a crisis." "You're always dealing with a crisis, Steve. First the betrayal, then the divorce, then the business. Now this. When does it end? When do you actually live instead of just fighting?" I didn't have an answer, because she was right. The panic attack started 2 weeks later, waking up at 3 a.m. convinced I was losing everything. The house, the business, my reputation, everything I'd fought to keep after they destroyed my life. One night I stood alone in my bedroom, the same bedroom where I'd caught them. I'd avoided this room for months after that day. Couldn't stand to be in here. Eventually I'd forced myself back in, refusing to let them take even that from me. But tonight, surrounded by furniture I'd paid for, in a house I'd fought to keep, I felt everything crash down at once. A year of rebuilding, a year of growth, a year of moving forward. And they were still finding ways to hurt me. I'd done everything right, caught them, divorced her, dissolved the partnership, built something better. And it still wasn't enough. My legs gave out. I slid down the wall, put my head in my hands, and just broke. The rage, the fear, the exhaustion. All of it poured out in that empty room while I sat on the floor where I'd once held a rifle and watched them scramble for their clothes. They were still destroying me, even after everything. Fred called me at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. I found something. I was at his office in 20 minutes. He looked like he'd been up all night. Coffee cups scattered across his desk, spreadsheets covering every surface, his tie loosened and shirt wrinkled. "Gerald Hubert," he said, pointing at his computer screen. "Your old accountant. He didn't just make aggressive interpretations, Steve. He committed fraud, actual, provable fraud." I leaned forward. "What kind of fraud?" "He created fake receipts for business expenses, inflated deductions, then pocketed the difference when your tax refunds came in. He did it to dozens of clients, not just you. How does that help me?" Fred's smile was the first genuine expression of relief I'd seen in months. "Because if we can prove Gerald defrauded you, the IRS penalties go away. You're a victim, not a perpetrator. And more importantly," he pulled up another document, "I can show that the business valuation during your divorce was accurate. Any financial irregularities weren't hidden assets. They were fraudulent accounting you knew nothing about. Can you prove it?" "I already have. I've been coordinating with the IRS investigator, Janet Morales. She confirmed Gerald's under investigation for tax fraud. Multiple clients have come forward. The evidence is overwhelming. For the first time in 3 months I could breathe." Thomas moved fast. Within 2 days, he'd prepared a complete brief for Judge Clarkson. Fred's findings, the IRS investigation, and something even better, emails Roseanne had sent years ago, questioning some of Gerald's deductions. "Your Honor," Thomas said, standing in that familiar courtroom, "Mrs. Harrison is attempting to profit from the same fraudulent accounting she once questioned herself. These emails show she asked Gerald Hubert about certain deductions, and he assured her they were perfectly legal. She knew something was wrong. She can't claim Mr. Harrison hid assets when the only irregularities came from a criminal accountant who defrauded them both." Valerie tried to fight it, argued that the emails didn't prove Roseanne knew about fraud, just that she'd asked routine questions. Judge Clarkson wasn't having it. "Mrs. Harrison," she said, her voice sharp as glass, You need to accept that your divorce is final. Your attempts to relitigate this settlement border on harassment. I'm denying this appeal, and if you file another one, I'll consider sanctions against both you and your attorney." Roseanne left the courthouse in tears. I left vindicated. The IRS closed their investigation 2 weeks later with a conclusion I never expected. I didn't know anything. Better than that, I was getting a refund. $47,000 in overpaid taxes from the years Gerald had handled my accounts, paid back with interest. Nicholas wasn't so lucky. The IRS determined he'd personally benefited from Gerald's fraud. Those fake receipts Gerald created? Some of them justified the embezzled expenses for Nicholas' affair. Hotels, dinners, gifts. Nicholas owed the full $180,000, plus penalties. I heard through a mutual contact, Dave Reynolds, who still did subcontracting work, that Nicholas had declared bankruptcy, lost his truck, moved back in with his parents, 38 years old, living in his childhood bedroom. I should have felt bad about that. I didn't. 3 weeks after the IRS conclusion, Roseanne showed up at my office. Todd intercepted her at the door. "Steve, she's here. Let her in." She looked terrible. Hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, no makeup, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that had seen better days. The woman who'd once spent $500 on shoes now looked like she shopped at thrift stores. "Steve," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk? You've got 5 minutes." She sat down across from my desk, hands folded in her lap like a scolded child. "I'm sorry," she said. "For everything, for the affair, for trying to take more money in the appeals, for what I did to you. I was wrong, about all of it." I leaned back in my chair, studying her, looking for the woman I'd married 20 years ago. She was gone. Maybe she'd never existed. "Is that it? I'm asking for your forgiveness." "No." Her face crumpled. "Steve, please. You destroyed our marriage. You betrayed me in every possible way, Roseanne. Then you tried to rob me blind when the divorce didn't give you what you wanted. You don't get forgiveness, you get exactly what you deserve. Nothing. I've lost everything. My job, my friends, my apartment. Nicholas and I broke up months ago. I'm living with my sister, sleeping on her couch. I have nothing left. That's not my problem, that's consequence." I stood up, walked to the door, opened it. "You made choices, Roseanne. You chose to cheat. You chose Nicholas over me. You chose to keep lying even after I caught you. Now you live with those choices. What am I supposed to do? Figure it out. The way I had to when you destroyed my life. The way I rebuilt when you tried to take everything. You wanted your freedom, you've got it, now leave." She walked out crying, shoulders shaking. I watched from my window as she climbed into a beat-up Toyota, her sister's car, and drove away. I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction. Just closure. 6 months after Roseanne walked out of my office, Tom Richardson from the city's Public Works Department called me personally. "Steve, we're awarding you the municipal complex contract. $2 million. Congratulations." I sat at my desk, phone pressed to my ear, and let that sink in. $2 million. The biggest deal in Harrison Construction's history. Thank you, Tom. We won't let you down. I know you won't. That's why we chose you. I hired 10 new employees over the next month, bought 2 new excavators and a fleet of company trucks, opened a second office on the south side to handle the expanded workload. And I did something else I should have done months earlier. "Todd," I said one afternoon, both of us standing on the municipal site as crews poured foundation, "I'm making you a full partner. 20% stake, effective immediately." He stared at me. "Steve, you've earned it. Performance, loyalty, competence. Everything Nicholas never gave me. You've delivered every single day. This isn't charity, it's recognition." Todd shook my hand, his grip firm. "I won't let you down. I know. That's what real partnership looked like. Earned. Built on trust that was proven, not assumed." I asked Clara to move in with me that same week. We were sitting on my back porch, drinking coffee while her kids, Emma and Lucas, played in the yard, 8 and 10 years old, full of energy and laughter. Move in, I said. You and the kids. Make this a home again. Clara looked at me, measuring. You sure about this? That's a big step. I'm sure this house has felt like a mausoleum since Roseanne left. Your kids bring life back into it. You bring life back into it. I want that. I want us. She smiled, reached over, squeezed my hand. Okay, let's do it. Emma and Lucas moved into the upstairs bedrooms a month later. The house transformed. Toys in the living room, backpacks by the door, noise and chaos and actual living happening in rooms that had been silent for too long. We became a family. Not through marriage or obligation, but through choice. I saw Roseanne occasionally around town, twice at the grocery store where she worked, wearing a green vest and standing behind a register. She looked older every time. Hair pulled back, no makeup, deep lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 2 years ago. The physical manifestation of consequences she never anticipated when she was sneaking Nicholas into our bed. She saw me once, and her face went pale. I nodded politely and kept walking. I heard through Dave Reynolds that Nicholas had left California entirely. Reputation too toxic. No one would work with him. Last anyone knew, he was working construction in Nevada for some small outfit, making barely enough to cover his bankruptcy payments. 38 years old, living alone in a studio apartment, broke and broken. Neither of them got the happy ending they'd imagined. They got reality instead. 2 years after I kicked open my bedroom door and found them tangled in my sheets, I married Clara in my backyard. Small ceremony. Just family and close friends. Emma and Lucas stood up as our witnesses, wearing their best clothes and grinning like they'd won the lottery. Daniel gave a toast that made Clara cry. To second chances, he said, raising his glass. To building something real instead of settling for something broken. To my brother who refused to let betrayal define him. And to Clara who saw past the damage and loved him anyway. I stood there in my backyard, the backyard of the house I'd fought to keep, surrounded by people who'd earned their place in my life, and something settled deep in my chest. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about justice. About making sure people who hurt you face real consequences while you build something better from the ashes they tried to burn. Roseanne took my trust and shattered it. Nicholas took my partnership and betrayed it. They both tried to take everything I'd worked for. Instead, they lost everything they'd hoped to gain. I didn't just survive their betrayal. I thrived because of it. Better business without a disloyal partner. Better relationship without a cheating spouse. Better life without people who saw me as an obstacle rather than a person. People still ask about them sometimes. Want gossip, want details, want to hear how far they've fallen. I just smile and say, I'm doing great. Business is thriving, family's happy, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Because that's the truth. And it's the only revenge that matters. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.